Okay, so today I'm really excited. We're going to go in a different direction than we normally do on this show. We're normally bring on people who are either subject matter experts in specifically e-commerce or successful store owners, but today we're going to take a broader look at marketing as a whole. So I have on with me today um, someone who I've gotten to know locally who is a business marketing consultant, I should say, and he works for a very large media company as well as on the board for some nonprofit work to help small business owners. So really excited to have Josh Brown here today. Josh, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. What an honor.
Yeah. You and I were talking. So we've met like at some local meetups here in I guess for the sake of explaining where we live, kind of the suburban West Palm Beach area. And we've met at a few local business networking groups. And, you have this passion around marketing. And I can definitely tell you really kind of, for lack of a better phrase, geek out on it. So I figured we'd just have this conversation, which would be somewhat for a lot of people, I think, a masterclass in how marketing works. Because I think it's good to not just know, like, what is the latest tactic on, how do I find keywords for my Amazon ads or Google shopping ads, whatever the case is, but understanding just how the whole world of marketing works so that way you can start tying in some of the other things that we're doing. So really excited to have this conversation. So, all right, so let's start with this. Can you tell everyone just a little bit about your background in the world of marketing?
I think it's really all I've ever done professionally. I guess you could consider delivering pizza and lifeguarding when I was young, but then my first job out of college was at a TV station, and I haven't looked back since. All I've ever really done is consult with businesses on their marketing and advertising. Of course, when I got started, there wasn't the digital. So I've kind of
Right.
watched this evolution happen.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was interesting is we were talking, and you work for a company called Sinclair Broadcasting, which a lot of people might be watching Sinclair stations and don't even realize it. It's basically a company that owns it's the largest company, if I understand, of
The largest independent broadcaster in the country, yeah, I would say there's a fairly good chance that whatever city you live in the United States, there's probably a local television station in your area owned by our parent company, Sinclair. It might be your ABC station or your CBS station. Here in our area, it's the CBS television station, a CW station, a MyNet station.
Gotcha. And the reason I think it was interesting for me is that you understand old world media like television. We'll just call it old world, which is crazy because you and I grew up with it and it was like the high tech thing. Whereas now with the internet, there's also all the stuff with internet. So we can talk a little bit about kind of the basics of that. And I think where this ties in for people who are e-commerce store owners is sometimes we get um, caught up in the box, so to speak, of how we're doing things. And I think if we can just go out a little bit broader and niche out, we can better understand how we can market to our customers and things of that nature. So let's start a little bit on the evolution of marketing. So how does television marketing work from the standpoint of, we've seen commercials, but what's happening in the back end?
Oh boy, where do we start? Okay,
Right.
we'll start with demand creation, and that's
Okay.
where a lot of advertising begins, is just awareness that there's a product that fits a need.
Hmm.
What was so interesting to me when I first met you was you work in a platform that you admitted needed demand, right? You didn't create it, you
Mm.
just kind of used what was there. And I found that so fascinating because that's a little different than what I do on a daily basis. For the most part, I'm tasked with trying to create some demand, trying to create some interest and awareness, get people a little further down the funnel to consideration. And at that consideration phase is when they're usually doing active shopping. That's when
Hmm.
their fingers are typing and scrolling and looking online on various different platforms. They're also actively engaged in talking to friends. Word of mouth becomes important. And then
Hmm.
they begin to notice more advertising around them. Every street sign that they drive by, or every television or radio ad that they hear, all of a sudden is important because they're in that shopping phase that we
Hmm.
call like low funnel activity. So I always try to have people envision this funnel that starts at the top with
Hmm.
awareness, then some interest. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe I'd like one of those, you use the example of the garlic press in the presentation I saw from you.
Right. That's
You know,
the
maybe I don't know
kind
I
of
need one.
famous one.
Maybe I don't know how it can make my life better.
Mm-hmm.
But some trigger event happens, right? I'm at a friend's house and they're cooking, and I'm like, hey, that's something I could use too. They're like, oh yeah, I got one on Amazon. So what do? I begin the shopping phase. I'll then go into the consideration phase, which is which one of these is right for me. And then I'll do some comparison shopping, price, features, benefits, and then I'll visit several websites. I'll get retargeted a lot, from retargeting, which is one of my favorite types of marketing. I'll do reviews, reputation, all that stuff comes into play, and then purchase. Then you have that action, and then it becomes a retention thing. Once they buy, do they have a good enough experience to where they feel like this is something I'd refer to a friend, or I'd buy again? And will they sign up for your email list? Will they stay in your marketing funnel? Those are all the fun things that happen after purchase.
Gotcha. Yeah, all good things to consider because, to your point, like as we talked about, in the presentation that you referenced that I had done for local business owners, was that, Amazon, for example, is the demand is already there. People are already searching. So you're really trying to just harvest the demand that's there and catch the fish as they're swimming by, so to speak. Whereas we're talking about things that are a little bit more top of funnel. So Amazon's actually done a lot of the work to get people there and get people in a buying mood. So now we're just kind of harvesting it. So there's a lot that happens kind of on the back end. So let's take a step back in history. Before there was an internet and people are trying to get, demand created to, their store, to their service, to whatever, and they're using television. What are some of the basics of television advertising? Like, how is it priced? How do you find the right place to advertise? Like, when that was really the main way to advertise.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Google as a search engine, and all search engines having replaced like the yellow pages as the one of the final stages in the purchase funnel, a business owner prior to digital advertising marketing, prior to search engines, they created demand with any number of traditional ads, like a newspaper ad, a radio ad, a television ad, direct marketing, dropping something in your mailbox to show up at your house. That was all designed to introduce you to the brand, introduce you to the product, how it could benefit you. If it was something everyone buys, like hamburgers or cars,
right,
or life insurance, you don't need to create so much demand. You just kind of have to force consideration. Why me? Why should you buy it from me? So whichever stage you were trying to do would create the demand. The final piece of the puzzle was put together either through a phone call or a visit to a retail store. Those were really the only two transactional methods. Now you bring in a click option to purchase e-commerce, and you bring in a thing like a search engine to pull up a whole list of results of potential, things or companies you could buy this from. And you now have this competitive feeding frenzy, which Google is brilliant at creating.
Right.
And it's just a slightly different way of doing it, but really not a lot has changed. I always say in advertising, I made an entire career out of advertising, but it'll never be as good as word of mouth, because if a trusted source tells me about it and I believe them, I already, this is my mom. She says this is great. Why wouldn't I trust her? Then that's going to be the best form of advertising you can get. But word of mouth isn't enough for most businesses. That's why they need advertising. But a lead or a sale that's created through an ad campaign is a little colder than a word of mouth sale.
Right.
The word of mouth sale was predisposed to liking, if my friend said this was a wonderful product and they used it and it helps them, makes their life better, I don't have any doubts in my mind. I'm just going to buy it. Price doesn't even matter as much. But with advertising, you're a little colder. You're like, maybe I should check them out and see what the reviews are like. Maybe I don't know if I'm getting a good price. Maybe I should buy the cheapest one because, there's a little risk here for me. And so advertising supplants word of mouth, but word of mouth kind of is that king, and it's always been there. And a lot of really good top funnel advertising actually just improves word of mouth. Like, I like to say that some forms of advertising can actually just be like throwing gasoline on the fire of word of mouth. If you already have a good product, you already have a good reputation, there are already people out there in the community who would refer you if they thought of it or if it was top of mind. But when they see you all the time, they begin to go, oh yeah, I remember him. I did business with him last, year, 10 years ago or whatever. That was a good decision. Sure, I would refer that to a friend. So it can actually fuel and lift word of mouth, good mass marketing advertising. So to kind of transition what you were asking, in the old days, you didn't have as many targeting capabilities. You bought an ad in the newspaper, you bought an ad on a radio station. You might say, well, I'm going to buy the country music station because I think my product appeals to people who like country music or people who like talk radio. In television, a little less targeted. You might say, well, I'll buy news because I think my customer watches the news, or I'll buy entertainment programming around the 7 p.m. hour because that's dinner time. And so if I want to sell pizza, maybe I run ads between 5 and 7. There were kind of basic targeting, and it was really just usually demographic targeting. So you'd buy a program that reached men 45 years old with 6-figure incomes because that was your target audience. What's amazing about the digital ads that you have today is you just target the men, 45 years old with 6-figure incomes. It doesn't really matter what they're watching. You don't kind of have to pay attention to what their favorite show is and pick it. Digital targeting allows you to just go out and buy that audience, and that's one of the more fun things that's transitioned in my career.
Yeah. And that's interesting because there was the marketing philosopher, I guess you could call him, Seth Godin. One time I heard him talking about how, back in the days, he was talking about spaghetti sauce as kind of an example, whereas spaghetti sauce was really designed to be for the middle. So it was designed to be, mass marketed to the most amount of people, whereas over time, now you have all these niche spaghetti sauces because there's other ways of targeting to people as opposed to, full house. People might be more likely to get pizza, sports, and maybe more likely to be interested in beer, and maybe soap operas, you're getting more consumer products. So everything was kind of more forced to the middle, but now because you have all these targeting options, you can target all kinds of things. So it's not just spaghetti sauce, of course, but it's, we have supplements and things of that nature. Like think about how, we were always kind of taught take a vitamin, multivitamin type thing, but now all of a sudden there's all these niche philosophies on nutrition and all this stuff. And I think a lot of it is because now you can target people that are a little bit more specific. So now let's talk about kind of how we talked there about like you said, it was kind of a more generic targeting in TV and just hoping that you're getting the right people and basing it on, are you seeing more phone calls or more visits or whatever the case is? But now we have internet. So now let's talk a little bit about what you've seen in the transition from going from TV to now you have internet. And then maybe down the road, we can talk about how the two even kind of mix together.
Yeah, a lot of businesses, especially local, try to use a television ad to generate a phone call. And that was an older tactic. I don't see that happening as often now because people aren't just sitting around with the phone nearby. They'll use the television ad to make you aware of what they're doing, to get their name out there, to get you more comfortable with buying with them. They know that some percentage of that viewing audience will go to your website just because you put it up on screen. You can easily measure that lift in Google Analytics. You'll see it's one of the things my parent company offers is we track when did the television commercial air, and then within 4 minutes did someone show up at your website.
Oh, okay, that's
that
interesting.
Is attribution. There's a plus minus window there, and you can see what days or weeks the advertiser was on the air. Well, there was a lift in visits to their website. You can also track it in multiple different ways. There's been a lot of research done on this topic, like companies that are on the air during a recession versus off the air during a recession. You can see what happens to their web traffic instantly, and then you see what happens to their sales down the road. So, we still have all these attribution models that work for digital that can be applied to traditional. People use things like tracking phone numbers in TV ads, in direct mail, in newspaper ads and radio ads. And those tracking phone numbers will be plugged into their CRM and can be tracked. And then you can measure things like web visits, conversions, and so forth with the free tools that are out there. But a note on targeting, just a second, if I could kind of go backwards, targeting is more expensive than broad advertising.
Right.
So in many cases, we find it's cheaper to advertise to a broad group of people, knowing that maybe even only 20% of the people who saw the ad would ever be considered, in market for what you do, because that actually still might be cheaper than trying to just find that 20%. Because targeting, the more data you apply to any type of digital ad campaign, the more expensive it gets. There's a reason why Facebook can charge premiums for highly targeted ads, and other like forms of display that aren't that targeted are very cheap.
Gotcha. So, and I'm sure some of this answer is going to be, it depends, but, well, let me take a step back. What is what's the way that the pricing is based on? Is it based on a CPM model, like cost per 1,000 views, or like in television, for example?
Most advertising these days is on a cost per 1,000 views.
Mm-hmm.
It's an easy to apply metric across lots of different ad tactics and channels. Not everyone, because like Facebook, while it might have a CPM, cost per 1,000 stands for CPM,
right.
stands for cost per 1,000, not to use too much jargon.
Right.
But they charge per action. For the most part, you pay for a click, or you pay for a video view, or you pay for some other form of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And you can figure out what your CPM is, your cost per 1,000. Television is generally purchased on a cost per 1,000. There are more complicated, older systems like cost per point, and that refers to rating points. Those systems are transitioning out at the larger ad agencies and across most media buying across the country, because they needed a way to give an apples to apples comparison between digital channels and traditional channels. Television, radio, and others are migrating towards a cost per 1,000, simply so that you can hold up your digital campaign next to your traditional campaign and kind of compare what you're getting for it. So even if the tactic or channel that you're buying, like let's say a Google AdWords campaign, that's a cost per click, it still has a CPM. Most people don't really pay much attention to it, but it's still a matter of how many times did I show my ad to someone before they acted on it. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, because like in Facebook advertising, for example, like even if you're doing for clicks or for views or for whatever, there's still, depending on what reporting screen you're looking at, eventually it'll show you the CPM. And I'm sure even with television, with, Nielsen rating points and or whatever it is these days, you can still do the math to figure out the cost per 1,000. So what would be a cost per 1,000 in TV, and compare that to, like, let's say a cost per 1,000 of Google display ads or something like that?
And that's where you get the it depends answer. Because prime time or sports is going to be a much higher cost per 1,000 than daytime or overnights or weekends or time periods with less demand on them. Direct marketers usually don't pay premium cost per thousands, because they're really just trying to scoop up as many random people as they can into their funnel. By direct marketers, I mean people who are trying to introduce you to the product and close the deal all in the same ad. They're typically not 30-second ads. They're maybe 60 seconds or 120s, or maybe even a paid program like a long-form half-hour show. Those forms of direct marketing, they've got to introduce you to the product, tell you how it's going to change your life, and get you to order it all in the span of that limited little time window.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, but wait, there's more. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. In order to do that cost effectively, they typically buy the areas with the lowest demand, because often actually those time periods have the highest yield, simply because the audience isn't as engaged with the show they're watching, and they might actually be more disposed to go make an order or a purchase right then and there, even if it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, So that's why you see a lot of direct marketing in off time periods.
Well, that's
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's just an interesting point there, because at the end of the day, it's all about getting eyeballs. So back to your point about, sometimes it's not even just comparing CPM to CPM, maybe whatever your action you're trying to get might end up being cheaper, even if you have a lot of people that are not the right person. Because look at all the people like the Tony Robbins and the Dean Graziosis and the Sham Wow guy and whoever else from that
Mm-hmm.
world, where they're buying all this time, oftentimes in completely weird hours,
Yeah.
but they made fortunes out of it because they were getting enough of the right eyeballs. And so they just had to have a filtering mechanism essentially.
And those buys they probably don't even know what their CPM is because they are only looking at a cost per action. They're really only tracking how many sales they're going to get out of it. They test and evaluate, and then they place further buys based on what they get out of their seed. And yeah, they'll never evaluate it like you will a primetime television show or a sporting event.
Sure. So with things like that, how would you even track it? Is it they have different different phone numbers, or is it
And
just
the
all
only
how much they
thing I can
spent and how
think
many
of,
calls?
yeah, phone calls, web traffic, orders, any kind of conversion tracking you have set up on your end, from whether that's just simple Google Analytics or more robust capabilities that are maybe plugged into your CRM if you have one, or if you're using any kind of enterprise level tracking. Just a simple tracking phone number, which is so easy to do. I mean, Google will hand you a few of them on any campaign. A pretty simple, like $30 a month call tracking service can give you a couple of extra lines that you can assign to different forms of advertising, whether they be TV commercials or anything. And that can give you some good places to start. And then unique URLs or promo codes. It was a fun little experiment for a while when everyone tried to do QR codes on the TV screen. I just think you don't see those anymore because it was so clunky. There is text in for certain responses. That's also very clunky. I did a lot of experimentation with that, but it was really difficult to get someone to pick up their phone and then say, text, offer to 121212. That's an easy one, but the numbers weren't always that easy. Sometimes they were like 765321, and you're like, I can't remember that.
Yeah, what was that again?
Yeah.
Yeah, QR codes were always a weird one. It's just recently my phone now has a native QR code reader. But, QR codes have been around for like 12, 15 years or whatever, but they've just never really taken off the way that I guess they hoped it would.
Yeah, what took it so long? I was wondering that the same thing the other day. I noticed that it had a native one on there. I'm like, why did it take so long to get that?
Right. You think it would have just happened. So, okay. So now, but I guess I'm going to drill you down a little bit harder, though, on the question of it depends on the pricing for TV, just so we have a little bit of comparison. So if I'm on the CW at or some television station where it's not like ABC, NBC, CBS, if I'm like at 3:00 in the morning, what's my CPM rough range versus if I'm in prime time, even if it's just a local station, like let's say West Palm Beach area?
This would apply to local, national. It would apply to a small station with small audiences or a big station with big audiences. Broadcast television, you could see cost per thousands of $10. So it only costs you $10 to reach 1,000 people. It would go up higher as you narrow the audience down. So while it might cost $10 to reach 1,000 adults 18 plus, if you wanted to look at just, well, how many of those are women 35 to 54? Well, that real number that's inside there might be more like $80, $50. See, because of all the adults watching, half the men, half women, and then half it again for how many of them were in that age range, and then half it again for how many of those were in just a certain county of that viewing audience. So the cost per thousands can get very high, even though the base is very low. And remember, we talked about it, that's not a very targeted way to do things. That's what I love about what digital has done. So if you're watching TV through a connected TV set, if you're watching, let's say, on your Apple TV or your Roku or Sling, there's now data point associated with your IP address and with your device ID. That data point is passing data. Yes, your TV is listening to you. Just like every device in your house is listening to you. And that data becomes a targeting set. So much like what you may be more comfortable with in display or pre-roll video, now there's a targeting set to go against that. And you could say, well, now only show my ad to women 35 to 54 who are in that zip code. And there may be even more targeting criteria. You may say who drive a BMW. You know, you can keep adding targeting onto it. It'll just get more expensive because the CPM on that type of advertising might start at around $30 or $40 and then go up the more data you need to add to it. So did that make sense?
That does. And that works the same on YouTube I guess it would be on YouTube ads, but then also on, Facebook ads and things of that nature. The wider you go, the less it is CPM, but you're paying more. So sometimes, to your point, it could be better for you to pay less per CPM and just see what you get out of it. Or sometimes it makes more sense to be very targeted, I guess, depending on your product and who you're trying to target. So, we all know that there's a lot of online capabilities. It's interesting what you're talking about with TV, where some of it's starting to get to be now you can target your ad to the right person depending on what kind of device they're using for TV, which is kind of a fascinating topic. So what advice do you have for someone who's like, okay, maybe my e-commerce product makes sense to do not just Amazon, which also probably has a little bit of a CPM model. We just never really thought about it because you can just, change up the data a little bit to figure out what it actually is costing you. But looking at, integrating TV, internet, things of that nature, because you do see physical products being sold. What advice would you have to someone that said, maybe I want to try that? Like, what kind of budget should they maybe even start with?
One of the things that I learned from you was how similar Amazon was to Google. You still have to write good copy. You still have to attract, and you have to build a good mousetrap. So if you're doing well on Amazon, there's a pretty good chance that you might be able to do well on Google. And so if you look at the similarities, it's incredible. There's competition on Amazon, there's competition on Google, and the keywords that you write into your ads and the images and the descriptions are going to be what elevates your product to the top in that competitive scene. And ratings and sales, as you've described to me, are what will help get you to the top in Amazon. Google will do it more on basis like relevance. So the more you can make your product a relevant search return for those keywords, more likely you are to elevate there. Now, many of the listeners of your show right now are probably in highly competitive fields. And so you got to look at the competition and say, can I really go head to head with those people in a bidding war on Google? That could be an incredibly expensive, proposition, because in addition to AdWords campaigns, you're going to want to have an organic strategy to get you to rise to the top there as well. So I would say that if you're graduating from, Amazon and you want to go into other forms of e-commerce, then you look at what's my strategy for my website and Google. And if you feel like you can make a play at it, like your product is strong enough to be able to win search results in whatever competitive space you're in, then you migrate from what you're doing inside the Amazon platform to what you're doing on your web page, and then how successful you'll be at getting some of Google's built-in traffic to come your way. And if you can do that, you may never need to have a traditional advertising campaign. You may never need to have any of the things we've talked about demand generation or creating interest and consideration. That's not likely because someone's probably already there doing what you do. So I think you first try to make that first jump and see what's there. And, let's say you're just an auto parts store and you sell the same auto parts as every other auto parts chain across the country. and they have bigger e-commerce stores than you do and bigger brand names, and they even are doing television advertising or other forms of advertising to generate demand for their brand. Well, you're probably not going to be successful just migrating over to web and Google searches and just all of a sudden winning a piece of the business that's out there. You'll have probably too much competition. So you would want to consider shrinking your geographic range down to something that might be more appropriate. Like maybe you can win stuff in your community. I'm trying to give advice for a broad range of products and services here. It's kind of difficult, but maybe geographically you can win business in the West Palm Beach region, or you can win business in Florida or on the East Coast or something like that. Maybe you can win business from a certain lifestyle person, like people who like golf or people who like boating. So you could steer your campaigns in that direction. But I believe if you set yourself up where you could win those Google searches, meaning you've got a great landing page on your website, it explains the benefits of your product. So anyone who comes there from an ad would likely convert in some way, whether that's a hard conversion or a soft conversion, then you've set yourself up to be ready to do business in wider forms of marketing. So first, we always work on the landing page. We always wonder, if I get someone to come here, will they buy? And if you get that part down right, then the rest is kind of easy. It's like, okay, we start with a simple Facebook ad campaign, or we start with Google AdWords campaign. And then we branch out. We do, let's say, some email marketing. We go and talk to, let's say, 30,000 people who aren't on our email list today, but that fit a certain, characteristic. Like let's say women 35 to 54 who live in certain zip codes, or who like to cook or whatever for a garlic press. And you email them something. Again, you're going to outlay cash for that ad investment in the email campaign. But if you get 1,000 of them to come back to your website, and you can convert 100 of them into subscribing to your email list and 10 of them into a sale, more than likely that's ridiculously profitable for you. And you kind of just keep going from there. Once you've built a model that works, you just keep attracting more and more people to it. And you can try whatever channel you want. You could try television, you could try emails, you could try, any form of marketing that is awareness, interest, trying to draw people into your funnel, but you got to build the funnel first.
Yeah. So let's close with this as kind of a last piece of advice. So most of the people listening to this are very focused on Amazon. Some have dabbled in their own stores. Some maybe are more primarily completely off Amazon. They have like their own Shopify store or whatever, but they're always thinking in this line of Amazon has a structure to it. And it makes sense. You got your title, your bullets, your description, your images. There's kind of a way it all flows, and it's pretty much a uniform thing of how it works. But when you get off Amazon, it's not quite the same. You can kind of replicate what Amazon's done, and it seems to work pretty well. But what do you give the advice for what are the things you try to make sure are on a landing page?
Let's see. I'm always about communicating clearly, being as clear as possible. I think you could actually see in the background here, I'm a big fan of Donald Miller and his Building a Story brand. I'm reading his new book right now and loving it. He encourages people to communicate clearly, to get rid of all the stuff in the middle that's just an obstacle that's actually preventing someone from doing business with you. So strong headlines. People don't read a lot, they scan. So you kind of want to just have like the main points that you want them to get. You've got to agitate a problem, he likes to say. So you've got to figure out what is it that your problem is solving for the customer. Once you do that, you've got a great message. I like video for landing pages. So while the words and the pictures are really important, oftentimes a video can do an amazing job of communicating that in a more personal and human way, especially with services like lawyers and doctors. We do a lot of marketing for. They like to see the guy on camera. They like to see the passion that comes through from that doctor about what kind of better health he wants to offer you. They get a feeling for what it would be like if I had a consultation with that doctor. So video can transmit so many great things. It can present emotional draws that would make you want to donate to a charity or buy a product. So we love video for landing pages. And then just never forget to keep asking for the order on that landing page. Keep having a big red button that says buy now, and measure and track. That's my final bit of advice. Measure and track everything, whatever you can measure. So a lot of people throw up a landing page, they put a buy now button on it, they advertise it, and they sit back and go, wait, I didn't get any sales, or I only got a few sales. How do I know? Well, you were only measuring sales. So try measuring how many people watched the video. Try measuring softer conversions, like how many people clicked on the About Us or How This Works buttons. In local marketing, we do a lot of, map and directions, that they clicked on the Contact Us box and wanted to know directions to your business. Well, that was a good indicator. We call those soft conversions. And then I think my favorite advice, and you hear this a lot lately, you hear this in every kind of marketing thing, is create a sales funnel. And what that means is basically use a lead generator of some kind, whether that's download a white paper, get this video, get something for free in exchange for your email address. And then once you have captured that email address, of course, enter them into an automated series of emails that will go advance that sale for you, and hopefully get them to come back to the page again and actually click the buy now button this time. Don't forget retargeting. It's really important in that low funnel phase. Retarget them for a period that's appropriate to your product, 30, 60, 90 days. So that's my favorite landing page advice.
Awesome. So if I may ask, if someone had any other questions or they just wanted to connect with you, is there someplace they could go?
Let's see, I guess my LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's kind of easy. That's the easiest way. It's just pretty easy. It's that Josh Brown.
That Josh Brown?
Yeah, I guess. I think if you typed in linkedin.com, and I think if you typed that Josh Brown, I did that a long time ago. I don't know.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think
I will, I'll link to that Josh Brown in the description as well. So well, thank you. This has been a enlightening conversation. Really appreciate having you on. And this was a lot of fun. So hopefully everyone got a lot out of it too in our little masterclass here on marketing.
Love it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Josh.